Hi everyone, I'm Vaishnavi from class 7th and today I have came up with a new idea that today I will let you all know about the history. So history is a form from the SST like general knowledge, and these all come from the history also in the modern times also and in the present also. So today we are going to discuss about the history times. History is from a SST part, SST social studies. So social studies, I know that we all are not having the some more interest in SSTs because there are long question answers. But today we are not studying the question answers. Actually, we will revise them also, and we will also discuss the chapter which is when, where, and how. Chapter number 1. So it is from class 7 book. The name is Footprints. You can open it. So the questions are written on the first page itself. That in this chapter we are going to study about the medieval Indian history, and we are going to discuss about the three forms which are different names of India. We're going to discuss about the sources and the trends of the medieval India, and then we will discuss about the history maker, the big ideas. And in the first thing we are going to discuss about the big idea, which means that the various terms used to describe the Indian subcontinent. So in this whole chapter we will discuss the various terms of Hindu subcontinent that was called at the previous time. Then we will discuss analyzing change over thousands of years through various sources of history. So, sources of history we know archaeological, literary, and many others, and their paths also are there. We will further study in this chapter itself. Then we will discuss broad historical trends in the medieval Indian history. So, the broad historical trends are also a part of it. We will discuss it later. Then, who is a history maker? Al-Biruni was a great traveler, astronomer, mathematician, historian, and as well as a geographer and a writer who came to India in the early medieval period. He wrote over 146 books. His book on India is called the Tariq al-Hind. Tariq al-Hind is a book which looks like this. This you can see al-Biruni, and he wrote over 146 books in his time, and there were many books, and from one for India it was the one that was Tariq al-Hind, and it was very famous also. Now, we are starting with the chapter and its key points also. So, what brings history alive for us? So, we all know that what brings history alive for us. Our mom and dad were born in the previous times, in the past times, but we are born now. So, it is the present, we have the past, and now we have the future, that what we will be in our future. So, we know that on what basis the history is divided into different parts. We know that there are other similar questions shall be answered in this chapter only, and that introduces the medieval Indian history also. So first we will start with the key point, which is the periodization of Indian history. So Indian history is broadly divided into three parts. The three parts are like we divide our future, our present, our past. Same as with the history, with the Indian history, that it is divided into three parts, which is ancient, medieval, and the modern period. And it is actually divided on the basis of social, economic, and political organizations, and changes to ideas and beliefs, like our devotion to God. We changed to devotion to God. From then to now we have like more more bhakti towards the goddesses and gods. So that is the shifts to ideas and beliefs. And other thing we have discussed, that each period is distinguished by its specific characteristics and developments. Now, characteristics and developments mean that the every period that is going and going on, like modern period is going on, and medieval period has been passed off. So, ancient period is also apart from the history only. So, ancient period studies that it was early from the 700 CE, and we know that 700 till 700 CE the ancient period was finished, and then the medieval period was started. In this chapter it is mainly discussed that what is medieval Indian history. So we will all focus on the medieval Indian history only. So the actual duration of the medieval period varies from region to region. So it varies from region to region, that if we are in Europe and if we are in India, so the past of Europe will be before or after than India, because there are more changes in the political, economic and social changes are there, and they are different from the than from India. That's why they vary from region to region. So while the medieval Indian history was going on from 700 to 1700 CE, 1750 CE actually. So then in the Europe it lasted between 600 and 1400 CE only. So we can see that the political, social, economic changes in Europe were more fastly gaining, and it was actually finished there very early only. And at that time, at that moment of time, Indian history was still going on, the Indian medieval Indian history. That's why it varies from region to region. The medieval period in India under study is further divided into two parts. So it is further divided into two parts. That means that it is divided into two parts, that are early medieval Indian history and late medieval period. So that comes from the timeline, and we will discuss it that from early medieval period it comes from 700 to 1200 CE, and from the late medieval period it comes from 1200 to 1750 CE. So the timelines are also different, and they are divided into two parts. The next key point of this chapter is various terms for the Indian subcontinent. Now, we are going to discuss this part, but before that we are going to discuss some key points of the previous part only. So we will form only four key points that I have studied in it. So the 4 points will be that the history, the main history word is divided into three parts, which are ancient, medieval and modern period. This is the first point. Second point is that our periods are divided into three, on the basis of three situations, on the social, political and economic situations, and shifts from ideas, beliefs also, you can write also that. And the third point is that the it varies, the actual duration of the medieval period varies from region to region. And then the last point will be that the medieval period is divided into two halves, which is early medieval period. The timeline is 700 to 1200 CE, and the late medieval period from 1200 CE to 1750 CE. Hope that is clear and points are also clear to you. Then we are going to discuss the various terms for the Indian subcontinent. Indian subcontinent we know is our India, and then we are going to discuss their historical periods. The various historical periods were there. Some books, because of some books we have the name of India. Because some rivers we have the name of India. Because of some rulers, there are many things. So we have to discuss it step by step. And the first thing is India has been known by varied and various names through its different historical periods. So that I told you that India has been known about the very like the books and the rivers. So that is the clear point. Then uh, in ancient period, India was referred to by the such name as Bharatvarsha and Jambudvipa. So the in the ancient period, not in the medieval period, in the ancient period, India was referred by the names as Bharatvarsha and Jambudvipa. So how did these names came? Let's study that. Bharatvarsha is mentioned in both of the books, which is Vishnu Puran and Rig Veda. So these are two books. There are sacred books, and uh, The Bharatvarsha word came from the Vishnu Puran, and Jambudvipa also came from the. It doesn't came from any book, but the Bharatvarsha word came from Vishnu Puran and the Rig Veda. Then the second point that in this point is South Asia was called as Jambudvipa, or the land of the rose of apple tree in Puranic and Buddhist texts. So the 2 points that we have formed in the below lines, that Bharatvarsha and Jambudvipa are divided, not divided, but Bharatvarsha was the upper part in the north, and in the whole India it was called at that time. And Jambudvipa was also called in the south times also. Then we discussed that Bharatvarsha is mentioned in two books, Vishnu Puran and Rig Veda. Then we discussed South Asia called Jambudvipa, and the other name for Jambudvipa was the land of rose apple tree, and it was mentioned in the Puranic and Buddhist texts that were written like Buddhists. And then the next point, like what was the India called in the previous times? Patanjali used the term Aryavarta, or land of Aryas. Now we all know very well that uh, that the land of Aryas was called the, also used the term Aryavarta, and then it was literally the good and the noble men. The Aryas were the good and noble men that helped others, and also were good. And then Aryas, to denote the northern part of Indian lying between the Himalayas and the Vindhyas. So Vindhyas in the west, little bit west side, and we know that the Himalayas are on the north and northeast side. We can say in Nepal. And then we, in this point, we have seen that the term is Patanjali, used the word Aryavarta, or the land of Aryas. So, which term was used by Patanjali? It was used Aryavarta. Then we discussed that Aryas were very noble and good man. Then the Aryas denoted the land of. So they denoted the land that it was from Himalayas to Vindhyas. So the land from Himalayas to Vindhyas, Patanjali used the term as Aryavarta. Okay, then the third point of this key point is the Zend Avesta, the sacred book of the Parsis. So the Zend Avesta is the name of a book. It is a sacred book of Parsis. Then it mentions Sapta Sindhu, or the land of seven rivers. India is also known as land of seven rivers, and also known as Sapta Sindhu. In the previous, from the Zend Avesta book, it is known as Sapta Sindhu as the name for India. It is the name for India, Sapta Sindhu. So how Sapta Sindhu word came? It came from Zend Avesta, a sacred book of Parsis. Then the fourth point is the ancient Greeks. Now, the ancient Greeks refer to the Indians as Indoi, or people of Indus. Now, we all know that in India, in the north part, in the Jammu Kashmir part, the Indus River is flowing through our country, and it was very like rich in cultivation. Every river has a rich in cultivation because of fertility of soil, and it was like famous at that time and this time also. So the river Indus, the Greeks, the ancient Greeks were called us, like we are now Indians. And before, the ancient Greeks referred us as not Indians but as Indoi people. Indoi people, like we are now Indian people, then they referred as us Indoi people, or the people of Indus. So Indus is a part of India. That's why they called us the Indo people. The fifth point of this key point is during the medieval period, the name that gained popularity was Hindustan. Now, as this chapter is whole about the medieval period, so the questions will be asked through this point only. So, this is the very important point, and it has more parts also. So, during the medieval period, the name that gained popularity was the word Hindustan, and with the term Hind. Hindustan with the term Hind. It has also joined the word Hind and it was also popular with it. These names are still used in the present day of India. As we call in Hindi, Hindustan, we still call it the Hindustan itself, and in English we call it India. And we also call it because it has the river Indus, and that we call India. Then we have this point only, that why should we know about this, like why did the Hindustan word came. There is no written, like in the previous one it was written that the ancient Greeks referred to the Indians as the Indoi people because there was Indus river. But in this point, during the medieval period, the name that gained popularity was Hindustan, along with the term Hind, and that refers us to that there is no key point there. So the key points are given below. You can see why it was called Hindustan and Hind. So the points are, the rulers of Delhi Sultanate and Mughals called the Indian Empire as Hindustan. So as it was the Indian Empire with the rulers, many rulers, Delhi Sultanate, Mughals, Rajputs, etc. were from that, Delhi Sultanate and Mughal people called the Indian people, Indian Empire as Hindustan, and that was gained popularity because of them. The second term why it gained popularity was the term came to be used for the region of India lying between the rivers of Indus and Brahmaputra. So, as we all know, Brahmaputra is the biggest river, and Indus is in the top, is in the north, and Brahmaputra Putra is in the east, in Assam area, Arunachal Pradesh area. It is in their part, and because of that, the two come together, and in the middle, it comes the Himalayan ranges and Vindhya mountain ranges. So from this, we get to know that the term came to be used in the regions. Regions, which regions use the term in Hindustan? The regions of north from the part of Indus, and then came to the Himalayan ranges, then to the Vindhyas, and then to the Brahmaputra river ranges. So that they call the people of that area called our India as Hindustan. Until now, it is very popular. We all know that it is called Hindustan till now. The third key point of this is the river Indus or Sindhu. So, Indus or Sindhu formed the western frontier of India. So, the Indus was on the top. As I told you, it was in the north, and it was forming a Sindhu, like it is also known as Sindhu, and it formed the western frontier. So, it formed it like a front page of the India, and that's why the word Sindhu, which was starting with the word letter S, became the H in languages of the visitors and invaders, because I think that the other people, that the tourists that came to see India at that time, the you can say the travelers, the foreign travelers were calling our India, calling that part as Hindu. That's why we all are Hindus right now. The Sindhu, like the Sindhu or the Indus River, is actually the main point that why we are known as the Hindu people, and that is why in the northwest part it is very popular over there. Then we have to discuss that people living on the eastern side, from the Assam side and Arunachal Pradesh side of river Hindu or Sindhu, came to be called the Hindus in the medieval period. So why did they call Hindus? Because they lived near the river of Sindhu, which was also pronounced as Hindu. That's why they called us the Hindus. And then we have to discuss that thus the land of river Hindu became Hindustan. So why did it became Hindustan? Because the land of Sindhu. Sindhu is also known as Hindu, that we have discussed. So that's why it became Hindustan. India's present name is also derived from the river Indus. As I told you before, only that why it is pronounced as Indus and India. That's why India word is came from the word Indus, which was the river in the Kashmir Valley. While the name Hindustan continued to be popular throughout the medieval period, the geographical area geographical area which was covered by this name varied widely. So it spread out in the world also, from the foreign travelers also. It came to be used Hindustan only. And that's why it gained popularity, as we told in the first point, in the very first point of it. So, in the early medieval period, the name denoted the land lying between the river Indus and its tributaries, and the land between rivers Ganga and Yamuna. Ganga and Yamuna are also there, and they join, and from the north part they come like flowing and flowing from there. That's why the early medieval period, the name denoted the Indus and tributaries between the river Ganga and Yamuna. So it also like joined together. Then, in the late medieval period, the name came to denote much of what is today modern India, including the South India. So the whole India is now having the same name. It is India only, Hindustan only. And it also gained popularity because now it is spreaded out in the world. And that's why we have to learn that why is South India was different from the one which we pronounced in the previous times, and why it is different from that of today's life. So now we have studied the second key point, which was various terms for the Indian subcontinent. Now we have completed the half of the chapter, and now we have two key points left, which are sources and the trends of India. So starting with the sources for studying the medieval Indian history. Why we study the medieval Indian history, and for what cases, what evidence we found from that. So, just like a detective collects a piece and evidence together to complete a story, and like how a crime is committed, and how historians find some clues, and how they find about the different very small evidence, even like it also can refer to us that if a small stone is there, if a small bone is there, so it can also detect that it was from 2 lakh years ago, 2 lakh billion years ago. So that is very important for historians. We cannot throw it back, and we are not able to touch them also. The common people cannot touch them, only historians, detective people, and like that, they historians study on that part so that they find their sources from it, and that is only called the source. What is source? Source is something that help the historians to find their clues, their evidences, and everything to study the past. And as also the different types of like foreign travelers come and they reconstruct our history, because they come from a totally social environment, and because they come from social environment, they have like many common if conflicts with the agriculture issues, and many other things are there that we are going to study in this part only. So let's start with sources to look out for while reconstructing medieval Indian history. So which sources we look at, and why we focus on them for reconstructing the medieval history, we will learn that. So, actually, in India, in the Indian medieval history, there are two types of sources in the this part, in this period. So, archaeological sources and literary sources. We will read brief about it, and we will also take the key points from it. And for studying that, we have to just study the key points, that what are archaeological sources and what are literary sources. So, first, we are going to discuss archaeological resources. Archaeological sources, the study of history through the material remains of human lives and remains of any other animal or in the living creature, any remains of something is known as archaeology, and the study of them by the archaeologists. So, archaeologists are something that check about the archaeology, that study archaeology to find the sources such as that may include monuments, paintings, sculptures, inscriptions, and coins. So what who are archaeologists? Archaeologists study about archaeology. The word archaeology, they study about archaeology. And what is archaeology? The study of history through the remains of any evidence of human life or any animal life, we can say. uh, that may contain literary sources also. Literary sources is something different from what there is the archaeological sources. And literary sources has two parts, which we read first. Let's read the literary sources. So the literary sources are found in the written form. So, what are written form? That we write literary sources. Literary sources were found in the written form, and they were written on in many languages such as Persian, Sanskrit, Arabic, Urdu, and regional languages, and many more. And they were like uncountable languages, because in different states of India there were different languages, and now in India we have 22 languages. So like there are commonly 22 languages, but there are actually more than that. I think in 1800s, like that, there are not 1800s actually. It is from, like, there are a big number of languages in India. And coming to the point that there are many languages. They were written in the many languages. So the regional languages were the ones that were actually mainly used to write them. And in the early medieval period, paper was still not used. Now, as we have paper, we have books. We compile our papers to make books, and we compile our books to make a stand of books. So that we have from our, like, the late medieval period, the paper was became the chief material to write and to for the literary sources. But in the early medieval period, not the late, the early medieval period, paper was still not used in India. In the early like in other countries, I think it was used, and we have to study about them later on. But in India, it was still not used. The materials that we used, now, how difficult it was to make ink over that time, and paints were made up of like very sand and water. It mixed into that, and that's why they painted. They started their literature writing, and from that to stages. Now they have like learned in languages. They have learned languages to communicate between each other. Then they have learned to write actually. So to write, they used bark of birch trees, palm leaves, some hard sources, and also they used animal skin. So if we took elephant, if we like just hunt an elephant, so we will take its animal skin, they will make its clothes, and they will just write. They will use it to write to literary sources, so that we human in the present time get to know that what was there in the past. Now we have completed the sources part, and the sources literary sources part we have completed. So we have discussed the archaeological sources and literary sources. Now we are going to discuss that what are the parts of archaeological sources. Now you might be thinking how tough is it to learn them, but there are very like easy definitions to learn, and these definitions are actually we see in the common life. And let's start with it. So archaeological resources has actually five evidences type. We can say monuments and buildings, inscriptions, coins, sculptures, and paintings. So we are going to discuss about them in brief. Monuments and buildings. These structures can be big or small in size. Some are beautiful. In fact, some are ruins. Ruins, it means they are bad in looking, and they are made from the because of some death or something, or they are made for war or something. So some are like ruins, and they are not bad. And some are beautiful, like Qutub Minar. It was made for some reason. That is why we look at that, and then we study about it. Then like we study about the archaeology. Then we are in the part of archaeology from a part of history. So that is why their examples can be more like forts, palaces, red fort that we see, red fort, like forts, palaces, temples, tombs, mosques, and clock towers, also clock towers, gardens, and so on. There are some gardens also that also refer about this, and there are some more examples that I will tell you. that inscriptions also. Now come to the inscriptions, that inscriptions are writing engraved on solid surfaces. Now it is now you might be thinking that in archaeology there was not tell that it was a written form. We have studied that in the literary sources it was a written form, but no, you are wrong. That but in the archaeological sources there are some written forms, and the inscriptions are an example for that, that they were the writings engraved from the solid surfaces such as rocks, pillars, and stone structures, and also some mosques. And we can see on metals also they tried to write. And the next thing we are going to discuss about the coins like we use in today's life are not were there in the previous life. They were made of many things, many metals such as silver, gold, alloys, and many more. These had different scripts and figures on them, such as we can say the Nataraja or the dancing Shiva is apart from the sculptures, but coins were having some like the gods and goddesses names, the kings or queens names. At that time, we have like kings and queens. That's why we don't have democracy at that time. So there were some inscripted figures on them. And now let's come to the sculptures part. That the sculptures were made from bronze, wood, stone, and depicted and have depicted figures of gods, goddesses, kings, or queens. So we know that the sculptures that were made in the, we say, mandir and the temple, they used to have some uh, like the sculpture that we see, like for example the Nataraja or the dancing Shiva is the example for the sculptures. And there were many, like Lord Ganesha's sculpture we had, and many other examples are there. And now we are coming to the part of paintings. What are paintings? Paintings can be found in the form of murals, portraits, and miniature. Now you might be thinking, what are murals? Portraits we know that are made like portraits of something. Uh, and what are murals? Murals are actually a large painting done on a wall. So as early humans lived in the caves and all, so their interest was that to learn new things, and the new things recovered that to write on engraved structures like rocks, pillars, and also like there were caves. This is my house and this is the wall, but they didn't have the wall. They had, after that, step by step they had the mud houses actually, and before that they had caves. So their writing was like to write on the caves, and their interest was there. That's why it is called the murals, or to write on a large wall. That is known as murals. Now, what are miniature? Miniature paintings are something that are much smaller than a thing of the same kind. If I draw a type of scale over here, for example, I have a scale. If I draw its miniature, so it would be like very small from that scale. If I draw like a book, so if I draw a book, like this is my book of French. If I draw a book on a drawing sheet, for example, I have this type of drawing sheet if I have, and this same kind of book is there. How can I draw it? So I cannot draw it, but its miniature can be small one. And now many books can come into it. That is known as miniature painting. Miniature means the amount of something we have, the amount of object we have to stay it short and make it short one. Now we have completed the archaeological sources, all the things we have completed, all the like monuments and buildings, inscriptions, coins, sculptures, paintings we have completed, and their parts also we have completed. Now we are going to come on literary sources. So what are literary sources? We have studied that, and we have to discuss that there are two types of literary sources. So the literary sources are non-religious written sources and religious written sources. So the religious written sources are the textbooks like Ramayana, Mahabharata, and other things. And non-religious written sources are four types: autobiographies, biographies, court chronicles, written of writing of foreign travelers, and also accounts of them, and royal decrees, and literary compositions, and texts on music. So we are going to read all these about in brief, and as there are 35 minutes, 35 minutes, so let's start with this topic. First, we are going to read about the religious written sources. So, what are religious written sources? It refers to that. It refers to a religion. The thing is following religion, Sikh religion. That's known as the religion, and religious religion texts were known as such as Ramayana, Mahabharat, and the saying of saints such as Dohas from a part of literary sources. So, what are religious texts? Religious texts such as are such a form of writings that were from a part of literary sources, and they were based on a regional language, and they were based on religion of something, such as Ramayana, Mahabharat, and Dohas that were written, that were the saying of saints like Tulsidas. We learn about them in Sanskrit and also in Hindi also. So he wrote Dohas. That's why it comes in a part of literary sources. Now we shall read about the autobiographies and biographies. So, autobiographies and biographies refer to the writings of many people, and they were written by the books and something. There are life stories of important individuals such as kings and emperors. They were written by individual himself or by the scholars. Scholars residing in his or her court. Then there were the court chronicles. So, what are court chronicles? Court chronicles are something that when several scholars wrote about the history of dynasties of the period, these texts were known as the court chronicles. So, what are court chronicles? Several scholars who wrote about the dynasty were court chronicles. Then we have to discuss that what are writings of foreign travelers. Foreign travelers have that came from a very social environment, and many foreign travelers, scholars, and pilgrims, and also royal ambassadors visited India during the medieval Indian history, and left behind an account of them, that how their journey was throughout the India, as they come from a social environment, they come from a different type of environment, a different from India type environment, so that their account matters to us, that how they look over India from, as there are the tourists, so how they look at India. So their accounts are also very important for us to reconstruct our history. Now, what are royal decrees? Royal decrees are orders given by a king or queen that remain as evidences for the historians to also reconstruct the history, and government documents or archives in the form of royal decrees or farmans issued, not farmers, it's farmers issued by rulers, form a part of the literary sources. So what does this mean? That the royal decrees are something that are orders given by a king or queen, and there are also a type of evidences that help the historians to there are documents and there are archives that help the historians to reconstruct history, to learn about history. And the last thing of these sources are that literary compositions and texts on music. So they form Tulsidas. Like Tulsidas is a very famous famous man. He wrote Dohas. Some same thing is with this, that he wrote Dohas on paper and he tried to sing that. So singing and saying of saints are known as Dohas. Same is thing with this, like literary compositions of text and music were known as this part of it. Then we shall now read about the archaeological sources of history. So, have read about archaeological sources in history in detail, and we have to read about some literary sources of medieval Indian history. So, I told you that there are some books, autobiographies and biographies, court chronicles, accounts of foreign travelers, and royal decrees. I told you in the literary part, non-religious written sources. So that we are going to discuss, that have some books, that were some books written by someone, and what was that the key point of that books. So Prithviraj Raso was a book written by Chandra Bardai. Chandra Bardai was the name of a man, and it was a biography. It is type of biography. Then we have the second biography, which is Humayun Nama by Gulbadan Begum. So it was written by Gulbadan Begum, and it is a biography. Then we have an autobiography, which is known as Babur Nama, also known as Tazuki Babri. So Babur, it can be asked in the question, what is the second name for Babur Nama? A book, a autobiography. So you have to write Tazuki Babri. Then the second autobiography is Tazuki Jahangiri. It was not written by anyone. And autobiography is Fatuhat-e Firoz Shahi. Then we have Court Chronicle, which is Abad al-Qadir Badoni Muntakhab ut Tazaki Tabarak, or Selection of Chronicles. Selection of Chronicles was the big name that I told. And Barani's Tariq-e Firoz Shahi, or Firoz Shah's History. It was also Court Chronicle. Then we have Raja Tarangini by Alhana. It was Court Chronicle. Then we have Abul Fazl Akbarnama, which is also Court Chronicle. Then we have Rihla by Ibn Battuta. It is the account of foreign traveler. Then we have Al-Biruni Tariq al-Hind that we read at the starting. It was Al-Biruni Tariq al-Hind. It was a foreign traveler, account of a foreign traveler. The journey beyond three seas. It is also account of foreign traveler. Then we have a Sanskrit Prashasti, which is a royal decree. Then we have discussed all the literary sources and the part of medieval Indian history. With this, we complete our sources. So we have completed three key features of Indian history. First, li- the part like what is Indian history and periodization in Indian history, different names of India, and then now we have completed the sources for studying the medieval Indian history. Now we are coming to the trends, broad historical trends in the medieval period. But before that, I am going to tell you how to connect to history. Calligraphy. On the page number 5, there is a last paragraph which is calligraphy, that is written. Calligraphy, or the art of writing alphabets in an artistic manner, was a common feature of the manuscripts written during the medieval Indian history were known as calligraphies. So, what were calligraphies? The calligraphies were the writing of alphabets in an artistic manner. So, that the common feature of manuscripts written during the medieval Indian history just show up us. That is known as the calligraphy. Floral and geometric motifs were used to decorate books and monuments of the period. So, the floral geometric motifs were used to decorate the books and monuments of that period. Then we have, although the knowledge of calligraphy already existed in India, Persian influence led to the rise of distinctive style. So we didn't always forget about the calligraphy. We still continued. Why we still continued? Because of Persian influence. Persian people influenced us that to write calligraphy in distinctive style and to make it beautiful with some floral and geometric motifs so that it looks beautiful for the modern periods. Now we are going to come to the broad historical trends and medieval Indian history. So before we delve deeper into the complex details of medieval Indian history, let us try and gain a broad understanding of the political, social, and economic, and also the cultural changes that took the place during this period. So, the medieval period was marked by the rise of regional kingdoms throughout the country. So, the medieval period was marked. It was marked by the regional kingdoms throughout the country. Then, an important group of people rose to prominence during the period, and these people were known as Rajputs, primarily as warriors and kings in the northern and central India. Now you might be thinking that what is Rajput? Like every word has its significance. So what is Rajput? Rajput were a kind of people, were a group of people who gained the popularity at that time, and they were actually the warriors and kings. And the name Rajput is derived from the word Rajputra, which means the son of a ruler, which means they have a like lot of strength. They have warriors, and they never like behind, they show their back, that they are not afraid of something. Raja Putra, we say Raja Putra, the son of a ruler. So now we have learned about who were Rajputras. Now let's come that Rajputras claim the Kshatriya caste status. So who claimed the Kshatriya caste status? Rajputs. Rajputs, the son of rulers, came the Kshatriya caste. Then four clans plays an important role in the history of the period. The Pratihars and the Chauhans and the Solankis and the Pawars. These were the four clans that their important role on the they have an important role in the Indian history. And these clans call themselves the Agnikula. Agnikula because they claim to have originated directly from sacrificial fire conducted by the sage Vasishtha on Mount Abu. So, Agnikula, why they call? Because they claim the originated directly from the sacrificial fire conducted by the sage Vasishtha on Mount Abu. Now we are going to come on the trends of India. The trends of that time are mainly referred as establishment of Delhi Sultanate after the arrival of Turks from the northwest and setting up the Mughal Empire were important political events of the period. So the political events were the Delhi Sultanate, that part only. Then we have the custom of granting land to nobles by the rulers in return to regular tributes and military help was a significant political trend of the period. The important social trends of the medieval age, including the increase in the number of new castes, the rise of tribal groups with their own distinctive identities and customs, and a sharp distinctive between rural and urban areas, were also social trends of that period. Then we have the flourishing of trade and commerce, along with the introduction of a more systematic assessment of land revenue, were the significant economic trends of the medieval period. The period also witnessed a revival of Hinduism. So this period also, the medieval period also witnessed the revival of the Hinduism. Then we have the religious reforms in the form of Bhakti and Sufi movements were major developments of the period. So, if in the question is asked that what were the major developments of the period, if it is in the short answer, like if we have to give in one or two sentences, so we can write that religious reforms in the form of Bhakti and Sufi movements were major developments of the period. Next and the last point is architecturally distinctive styles and technologies arose which added to the grandeur and magnificence of medieval Indian buildings. So, who came to distinctive styles, technologies arose which added to the grandeur and magnificence of medieval Indian buildings. Now we have completed this chapter, and we are going to do some tick mark questions that what we have learned in this chapter. Chapter checklist. Come to the page number 7. Tick the concepts you have understood. Now you have to do this on your own, that what concepts you have understood on your own. Then we have, let's recall the we have the tick mark questions and question answers that we will discuss in the next class. Now there are 50 minutes completed and the time is also over now. So we will continue the tick mark questions and the question answers in the next class with some that like the doubts that I have in the question when I ask my ma'am. So I will discuss that questions also in the next class. Till then, bye bye.